I can never have children. We can adopt some. But you don't understand, Osgood. I'm a man. Well, nobody's perfect.
These damn Americans, Frank Capra said of his adopted countrymen. These damn Americans, they're so free, individuals, on their own, not taking their hats off to anyone. Those early lessons, a love of country and proud independence, characterized the life and career of Frank Capra. In the 30s and 40s, he chose to sing the songs of the working stiffs, the short-changed Joes, the forgotten poor. He made films in which good men found their voices. And the films were his films, made his way. Frank was never found taking his hat off to conventional wisdom, market research, the front office, or the latest trend.
Lucky you!
Best 36 holes in golf.
You tuned in to Alternate Shots Podcast,
Arnie's Army.
where we talk about golf,
Barkeys, Sandy's,
poker,
Bond, James Bond.
horse racing,
I'm all in.
great movies.
Alfred Hitchcock.
We have no script.
And down the stretch they come.
We're glad you joined us.
Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
Whoop, let's start again.
Oh, I left right in the middle of it. As soon as I got Mary's telegram. Good idea, Ernie. A toast. To my big brother, George, the richest man in town. That's a Christmas present from a very dear friend of mine.
Look, Daddy, teacher says every time a bell rings, an angel gets his wings.
That's right. That's right.
All right, Billy, this is part 2 of our Billy Wilder versus Frank Capra, one immigrant versus another, kind of born around the same era, both in Europe, and taking a flight to the United States and becoming great, world-renowned directors.
Yeah, they seized opportunity, and they came from a place where there was no opportunity. So, you know, they both accomplished a great deal in different ways. Frank Capra had a unique, I would say, approach to filmmaking, where he was very, very concerned with making the audience feel something. Much like Spielberg with E.T. or in the modern day, I always say Spielberg is like Capra, twisting everyone's emotions. Spielberg is a little different, but Frank Capra made you laugh and cry and do all the things, even sometimes at the expense of realism, which is okay with me. Hollywood doesn't need to be real. I don't.
It's allowed. I don't know about Spielberg, but Frank Capra's first thing. You know what his first thing he remembers he saw when he came to America? The very first thing?
The Statue of Liberty?
You got it. You're the winner. Chicken dinner. He saw that. And what an impression. He was a young boy with his mom and dad and his siblings. But he wasn't all Pollyanna. He was a hustler. He was a poker player. He
was a student of human behavior and of human nature. So, we play poker. I see guys all the time, and you're like, I can tell this guy's a poker player, but he's also a sensitive, honest human being. You pick up on people's nature when you expose yourself to it as widely as he did, or as a lot of people do. And if you're tolerant and understanding, you see it as human nature, good and bad, but you're not so judgmental about it. You just decide, I prefer this type of human nature. And that's what Capra did. And he put it in movies. I think he made a statement saying something to the effect that you have to be morally strong to make great movies.
For the best directed picture of the year, you can't take it with you, In behalf of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, we present to you, Frank Capra, this award. As you know, this is the third time you have won this highest of our awards. And in all sincerity from my heart, I thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Niblo. I'm very happy to have this again.
I don't know if he was saying he was that way or not, but his movies all have, like Aesop's fables, a moral.
Well, I think deep down of all the hustling and conning and turning the truth here or there, that's how he got by. He got by, he answered an ad in San Francisco. He was doing some work, and San Francisco never directed a film, and he answered an ad to be a director. Sure, I can direct. Yes, I've directed, and so forth. He showed up. And the only reason he did that is in those days, you'd get an advance as a director. Maybe it was a couple $100, maybe it was $500. It wasn't thousands of dollars, but remember, this is 100 years ago and 90 years ago, maybe. And he was going to take the money and flee town, but he got into it. He really enjoyed the movie life, the directing. And so that's how he got his start.
He's his own example of the good guy turned bad, an understandable scallywag, finds out, maybe there's more to this going the other direction. And that happened often in his movies.
Well, he was also pitted up against the most, notorious people in the business. Harry Cohn was in charge of Columbia Pictures, and they used to call that Siberia because it was a crappy, lousy, low down, bottom of the barrel. It was not MGM, it wasn't Paramount. It was low down. And so he was the guy, and they molded him, and he used to have some screaming, yelling matches with Cohn, and then they go out and have a drink later. People just couldn't believe it. But that's how they got along. And Cohn was testing him. Cohn was building him, must have been a few years older, as a human being, as a director, as a manager.
Yeah, and the actors that he used in his movies were all they weren't the hardcore, you're not going to find Edward G. Robinson or James Cagney or Joan Crawford, for instance, in his movies. So the gritty actors, it's Cary Grants and Gary Coopers and all the fan favorites because of their gentility, I guess is a good word for the type of actors and actresses. Priscilla Lane, for instance, is a sweetheart. She was the girl next door all the time. And she was Cary Grant's sidekick in Arsenic and Old Lace, as you see in the picture here.
Yeah.
And his movies were all start to finish meant to move you on some level or another.
Sentiment was the operative word. It's funny, Priscilla Lane's in this picture we're looking at. She's actually sitting in the director's chair. You can see her elbows on Mr. Capra, and Cary Grant is there. And then just to the left of Cary Grant, that's Frank Capra. But I don't know who the other gentleman might be, the cameraman. But they're on the set, and they're all mugging for the camera. I say Cary Grant gets, well, yeah, that's a great picture of Cary Grant. But Capra's over there like an actor. He's mugging for the camera.
Yeah.
That's him in the hat and the fedora.
And Cary Grant's name in that movie was Mortimer.
Yes. Have you ever heard of another Mortimer since?
No, maybe in a cartoon, but yeah, no.
And,
so it and Arsenic and Old Lace. If people haven't seen it, the concept is Cary Grant is marrying Priscilla Lane. He goes home and he's got his two eccentric old aunts who are poisoning people they think are unhappy. They advertise for a room to board in, and when someone comes, if they think the guy is unhappy, they poison him, and then they bury him in the basement. Now that doesn't sound like a comedy, but it is, especially considering Cary Grant's brother Raymond Massey, who is portrays a very scary looking, if not a little bit comical because the movie's comical, but you could have taken Raymond Massey's role in that movie and put it in a Boris Karloff movie and it would work.
He'd have been Frankenstein in a second. And he
Yeah,
was kind of a facile, smarter, conniving Frankenstein, but he was
yeah,
the same build. And Peter Lorre's in that movie, and he's just his sidekick. He's this little wimpy guy that helps him move the bodies. And
yeah. We'll talk about the cast of character actors. There's Peter Lorre is unique.
yeah,
He again he could play. I mean, he played Mr. Moto, where he was the hero in a series of movies, a very wise detective, and he played a guy who gets knocked off pretty early in Casablanca. He's in the Maltese Falcon as a snivelly little guy.
that Capra did. And I just never get tired of watching it. Is it happened one night? And basically, we talked about this a bit, but we should frame this a little bit. Um, Louis B. Mayer, wanted to teach Clark Gable a lesson. I guess Clark Gable opened up his mouth, maybe he didn't have an agent, he wanted to get more money. And that irritated Louis B. Mayer, so he sent him down to Siberia. Siberia was to go do a picture with Columbia and
Right.
Capra. And so, he taught him a lesson. Well, he sent him down there, and then they got Claudette Colbert to do this picture. They didn't have anybody who wanted to do it. Well, this is one of the most successful movies of all time. And Louis B. Mayer wasn't even considering about the movie or the production value or who was going to come watch it. He just wanted to teach Clark Gable a lesson.
Rather difficult for me to say anything at this time, naturally. However, I do want to take this opportunity of expressing my thanks and sincere gratitude to Mr. Frank Capra, the director of It Happened One Night, and Miss Claudette Colbert, who was gracious enough to co-star with me in that same picture. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, and, I'm rubber, you're glue. Whatever you throw on me bounces off me and sticks on you, or whatever that expression is. So, he was hoist by his own petard. There's a similar Howard Hawks, who directed. We talked about him, Bringing Up Baby with Cary Grant and Katharine Hepburn. That was a box office flop, and it got Howard Hawks thrown out of there. And then it became a big hit. So sometimes these guys can't see the forest for the trees. There was the old story of the guy who auditioned Fred Astaire. His remarks were, "Can't act, can't sing, can dance a little." Oops.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. We showed a little bit of the most famous Capra film in It's a Wonderful Life, but that was not that wasn't successful right out of the gate.
I would say it was probably watched more by our generation than the generation it came out in.
The generation it came out in didn't like it. And then yet this is the movie that defines Frank Capra and defines the sentiment, and he got everybody to believe in the characters, the old banker,
It's on, it's calmed down a little bit over the last couple of years, but 10 or 15 years ago, at Christmas time, you couldn't turn the TV on without it being on some channel. It's one of the Christmas movies that it goes on the list with A Christmas Story and Miracle on 34th Street and It's a Wonderful Life. Those are big Christmas movies that you can count on seeing them on TCM or any number of TV stations at Christmas time.
Capra really understood people. He understood sentiment. He built up the characters. So in a way, he's a little like, Hitchcock built up the story, didn't rush, because if you didn't,
Right.
if you confuse the audience, they'd never understand the suspense or
Right.
get relief from the suspense. But Capra built up just the thought. Now, he didn't write It Happened. He didn't write It's a Wonderful Life. Somebody else did. But the thought of somebody committing suicide and not being here his whole life is incredible.
Yeah, and he had a way of manipulating the plot and the characters and the way he presented the movie that engaged you. It's like, no, we don't do that. It's not, you got in that. And what was the character who played the angel? I always
Clarence.
forget his name. Clarence, but
Well,
I can't remember the actor's name, but
I didn't have time to get some stylish underwear. Wife gave me this on my last birthday. I passed away in it.
Oh, it's against the law to commit suicide around here.
Yeah, it's against the law where I come from, too.
Oh, where do you come from?
Heaven?
How'd you know my name?
Oh, I know all about you. I've watched you grow up from a little boy.
What are you, a mind reader or something? Well, who are you then?
Clarence Oddbody, AS2.
Oddbody. AS2. What's that AS2?
Angel, second class.
Every time a bell rings, an angel gets his wings. There's so many things in that movie that that make you feel good. As that's Capra's game. Mr. Deeds goes to town. Mr. Smith goes to Washington. It's an underdog being swamped by big business or big government or big bullies that has to, withstand it and come through the other end. And Capra would manipulate, reality to the point where, courtroom scenes could never happen in that way in real life. There's no such thing as a committee that decides if a guy's insane and has to give all his money away, But Capra would make these obstacles, and you didn't care. That's okay with me, It doesn't have to be by the book. What he was telling us was, everyone's against this guy except the audience and the girl and you and me are for him. And at the end of the day, he'll fight his way out of this trap through this mire of Capra-like bullies and win the day. And we'll all be yay, but there's a couple of movies where suicide is part of the plot.
He took on Meet John Doe. Nobody wanted to do Meet John Doe with Gary Cooper. A couple things about that. His point about Gary Cooper, he said the women loved him. The women loved him. So already
because he was the big bashful cute guy.
Yeah, he's thinking about that with Cary Grant here. With we'll put up a picture of Gary Cooper, and yet nobody wanted that movie because the movie ends in a suicide the way it was written, and they couldn't figure out that, and they didn't want to do it. But Capra figured it out, and
he had Joe America and all the crowd around him, talk him off the ledge. The common people, the you and me, who are saying, no, we don't care what you did. You might not have intended it, but you did do something good. We still need you to hang around. Don't do it.
Yeah.
We don't care that it was a farce. And in a way, that's the message that, it's almost a little scary. The fact that this was all set up, they made up this character to start a movement, blah, 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 that turned out to be something it should have been, even though it wasn't intended to be a movement. It's almost like reverse propaganda in a way. But again, Capra was aiming at moving the audience, and he succeeded at it. And Hollywood, to me, it's not supposed to be real. I mean, there's no such thing as flying cats and Superman and stuff like that. It's make believe. Put your reality check at the door and watch the movie. Like a friend of mine said years ago, we were watching cartoons and the elephant was flying. I said, that's ridiculous. Elephants can't fly. And my friend said, that one can.
That's right.
That's true. That's what Hollywood is. Yes, you can. In our world, this is what happened. We're telling the story. Get on board or change the channel.
Meet John Doe. I just love Walter Brennan. He wanted to get out of there. He wanted to go back and sleep under the bridge in the cold by the river.
Yeah.
Hear the train.
Playing the harmonica. Yeah.
He plays harmonica.
Walter Brennan is at the top of the class of character actors of all time, and for 5 decades probably.
We talked about Howard Hawks and To Have and To Have Not. He was great in that, but he had a pretty prominent role in here. Barbara Stanwyck was great in this too.
She's always great. And Barbara Stanwyck, there's a career that went on. She's in Double Indemnity. She's in Meet John Doe. And she went on after all of her Hollywood success, from the 30s on, to becoming the star of The Big Valley, which was like one other network's answer to Bonanza back in the late 50s and 60s.
Nothing was bigger than that show. And before that, she did Christmas in Connecticut. She pulled that movie together with Cuddles and, a couple
Sydney
other
Greenstreet.
actors. Nobody can name those other actors but you. Uh,
Sydney Greenstreet was there, and Reginald Owen,
Una, Una O'Connor.
Una
I,
O'Connor, right?
I love
Yep.
the maid Una O'Connor. I think she was a voice in one of the scary movies. She was the Scream, right?
He might have been in Frankenstein.
Might have been, yes, in Frankenstein.
Yeah, that's a good role in there. And then you got Cuddles, Easy Sakel, who flipping the flapjacks. That's a comfortable movie,
I
and
wanted
another
to eat
very
his food. I wanted to go to that restaurant. That restaurant looked great.
absolutely, absolutely. And how many times does that happen? That happens a lot to me in movies where you see them sitting in a nice little Italian restaurant or something like that.
Capra's a lot like Howard Hawks in that he was smart. Cary Grant was great comedic actor. It made it easier for the director to have Cary Grant in the picture.
Yeah. Well, that's why he used Cary Grant, was considered by a lot of these directors as a comedian. I mean, he could play a serious role, but he was better in the lighthearted stuff, and sometimes even the in-between stuff, like Mr. Lucky, where he's, he plays like a con man who gets won over by the girl. That's a good movie, Mr. Lucky.
What's your favorite Capra movie? Take out it. It's a Wonderful Life. Let's leave that one out.
I'd say It Happened One Night. I enjoy it every time, again, because of the character actors. Alan Hale plays a great role in that movie where he picks them up hitchhiking and sings everything.
That's right.
Are you hungry? Oh, we're not hungry. Young people in love are seldom hungry. He sings everything.
He was a happy character, but then he absconded with their stuff.
With their luggage.
I remember.
Yeah, but I always wondered, Alan Hale takes off in the car with the baggage and Clark Gable goes after him and comes back. How did he catch him? Clark Gable was great in that movie because he knows everything. He knows how to hitchhike. He's got the technique for it. He's telling her how you dunk donuts. The way he's eating a carrot and talking inspired Bugs Bunny. There was no Bugs Bunny before It Happened One Night.
Bunny,
well, he was eating the carrot and talking and telling her how to dunk donuts. You don't know. You have no idea how to dunk. He was pretty funny. The whole movie was pretty funny and pretty well conceived. And it wasn't, the same manipulative, emotion stirring drama that Capra was famous for. This it was different. What Capra did was he put this long storyline together, and throughout it, you got to meet all kinds of different people. So it was sort of like a parade of characters that would come through this movie, whether they're good guys or bad guys or kids or whatever they are. There was never a movie that didn't have someone in there that you could identify with. Yeah, I knew a guy like that, or that guy makes sense. I mean, like the scene on the bus where they're all singing "The Man on the Flying Trapeze." Everybody knows that song. I don't know how I know it, but everybody knows it some way or another.
I love the sailor gets up there and he's swinging and
But that's what I mean. There's all different.
Time. This is the Depression. It was horrible. The time was horrible. That bus ride was in the rain. The roads were terrible back then, and
that was what Hollywood did. Hollywood probably saved America during the Depression because the diversion it provided for people was palpable. I mean, there was no question that movies were what let people escape from misery for a couple of hours on the weekend or whatever it was. There's no question that it was a savior for a lot of people back in those hard days.
Yeah. The irony about the whole life of Frank Capra is that he and another movie director went in to create this independent studio. And that's where they built or they produced It's a Wonderful Life. And because it didn't have commercial success right away, it basically sunk Capra. And he had to go back and doing other things. And later in life, basically what he did is the young people loved Capra. So the wannabe directors, filmmakers, writers, directors, cameramen, he would go from university to university, and they would stand in line for him. They loved him.
That's the thing he made movies about. The very thing that was beating him down. He was the victim of the bully at that point, the corporate powerful guy, which was there was always one of those. It was whether it was Edward Arnold in Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, or I don't remember the guy's name in Mr. Deeds Goes to Town, or I think again Edward Arnold in Meet John Doe.
You say four of these movies are basically remakes of each other, right? What are the four movies that are basically the same?
In a way, It's a Wonderful Life, Meet John Doe, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, and Mr. Deeds Goes to Town. They're all, in a way, the same kind of movie where the audience loves the main character. They think he's great. He's an upstanding, honest, integrity, all of that there. And then there's a bad guy that just doesn't really make sense, but you need him. He's the Snidely Whiplash. He's just a villain because he wants to be a villain. There's almost nothing for him to gain. And in all of these movies, that villain singles out our guy, whether it's Gary Cooper or Cary Grant, or James Stewart, to crush him. It was like Lionel Barrymore. That's what he was doing. I'm going to crush James Stewart. Yeah. Edward Arnold, I'm going to crush Gary Cooper. With Barbara Stanwyck's help, although Barbara Stanwyck turns on him, so there's a lot of similarity. Jean Arthur is the bait in Mr. Smith Goes to Washington with James Stewart, and in that movie, Edward Arnold's going to crush James Stewart with the help of Claude Rains. So, if people haven't seen these movies, they don't know what I'm talking about. But the general gist of it is, our hero is an underdog, and he's fighting town hall. Or City Hall. Like they say, you can't fight City Hall. In all of these movies, they do fight City Hall.
This is a prolific director, filmmaker who came from nothing, came out of the nobody wanted to do the jobs in filmmaking. He got himself into a director by fibbing.
He had self-confidence.
He had a lot of confidence, but he said the secret to, I'm paraphrasing, but he liked people.
I've loved listening to all this talk about the so-called art of Frank Capra. Art. And because you've been so kind to one Francisco Capra, born a peasant nearly 85 years ago in Bisaquino, Sicily, tonight I'm going to tell you the real secret of the whole thing. The art of Frank Capra is very, very simple. It's the love of people. And add two simple ideals to this love of people: the freedom of each individual and the equal importance of each individual. And you have the principle upon which I've based all my films.
Well, and he wanted you to, and succeeded in making you leave the film feeling good. When you watched Frank Capra, you left the story complete, and you were happy with the ending. Two of the greats, but like I said before, like Wingfoot, 36 great holes. We figure we could cover them in 36 episodes, but it goes on and on. It's the same thing here. We've opened a can of worms, and we've now touched on 6 or so directors. And there's probably 60 more that can fit right into the same category on one level or the other coming straight up to today. So I think we're going to be talking about these guys for a long time.
Ladies and gentlemen, the recipient of the 10th Annual Life Achievement Award, Mr. Frank Capra.
he said to the studio, look, I want to be taken off the Frank Capra because they work so hard. They work so hard. They work night and day, night and day, night and day. He said, I want to be taken off the list. And then he went to see the movie. And he saw the movie, and it was so great. He said, no, keep me on the list. He was
Put me on the top of it.
He was with Capra for 20 years.
Yep.
And that's what these guys did. They stayed together. I think the same thing is true with the other famous Hollywood filmmakers. This is great, Billy. We're going to wrap it up. We're going to probably share our views on the Masters in the next episode. Hope you enjoyed this one.
And let's hope the Masters turns out to be like a Frank Capra movie, and maybe, you know, some surprise visitor from another planet comes and steals the Masters. It would be interesting.
I would rather be a filmmaker than anything else that I know.
Why are you laughing?
Well, at least we have the laugh to add it. That's what happened. Somebody changed my grip, and the next thing you know, I can't do the podcast anymore. I felt like I was in the first row of the first pew at church, right during the sermon.
And your brother was poking
My
you.
brother was making me laugh.